Let's go ahead and get started. Firstly, I want to thank everyone for joining this discussion on Office 365 migration and adoption in the modern workplace. See if I can work everything here. My name is Ken Cadwell. I'm the Director of Sales at Directions Training. Don't panic. I know you're all thinking the same thing. They gave the microphone to a sales guy, but there were long conversations, and I've been given strict guidelines on how much I can actually talk, so no need to panic. I do have a couple things to go over real quick on housekeeping, just to let you know all the mics are muted. So if you have a question, and we hope you do, please utilize the chat box to submit the question, and we'll get to those questions as soon as we can. We have Tom Vanek, who's our national channel manager, manning the questions for us, so he'll pop in. And also just want to remind everybody we are recording the session so that we can make this session available to those who couldn't attend. So we all know business needs are evolving, and organizations must stay responsive to meet those needs, providing employees with modern tools that are effective and collaborative. It allows for higher employee engagement and productivity. So today, we're going to talk about what those tools are, how to migrate to them, how to ensure end-user adoption. So before we get started, let's go ahead and meet the panel. If I could ask, well, I already messed up. See, that's why you don't put a sales guy in charge. Just to go over the agenda real quick, we're going to do introductions, then we'll have the panel discussion, and then we're going to be sure to save some time for some Q&A at the end of the hour. So hopefully you'll have some questions. So I'm going to introduce our panel here: Meghan Dorn from Microsoft, Kris Gronert from FlexManage, and Jennifer Didier from Directions Training. Meghan, if we could start, you could say one or two things about yourself, introduce yourself.
Yep. Hi, I'm Meghan Dorn. I have been with Microsoft environment for probably over the past 15, 20 years as a customer, as a partner, and most recently as an employee at Microsoft. So I'm looking forward to discussing this topic with you today.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Meghan. Hey, Kris, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey, everybody. My name is Kris Gronert. I'm formerly a national practice director. I am currently a sales executive, but I will be talking a little more. FlexManage is 20 years old, based out of Chicago, offices around the United States. We're in the top 30 of Microsoft managed partners, and we do the entire Microsoft stack with the exception of Dynamics, so we are not a CRM partner. We also do managed services, and we partner a lot with Directions Training.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kris. Jennifer?
Hi, everyone. This is Jennifer Didier, President, CEO of Directions Training. Directions is a global leader in IT, business, and enterprise training solutions. We've been around for over 25 years, and we help our clients achieve success and really realize maximum business efficiency.
Fantastic. Okay. So we've got a great panel here assembled that has a great perspective on everything that needs to be considered when migrating to the Office 365 environment, including end-user adoption, which is one of the key components. So let's go ahead and get started. Meghan, I'm going to start with you. What are some of the top reasons top things that customers think about when they're deciding whether to migrate from their established platform to Office 365?
Some of the main things that we hear in our discussions with our various clients are, what are they doing today and what do they want to be doing tomorrow, right? So we've all heard the buzz most recently about digital transformation, and this is one of the most significant changes that an organization can take upon, looking inwardly at how they can do things differently. Most companies want to gain a competitive advantage from theirs and remain competitive, right? So both, and looking inwardly at their business processes and how they're currently doing things. How can technology optimize their operations, transforming their products, different ways that they can engage with their customers and empower their employees. And then overall, I'm sure we're all aware right now as well, is keeping their data secure, right? So how do we better help our customers keep data secure? For the most part, the main thing with O365 is obviously empowering the employees in the workplace for these organizations, and what can they do to embrace any of the trends that are happening in today, and making the workspace really inspiring and empowering for their workforce. And I think we know today there's more and more people who like the flexibility. They want to be able to work from home or work remotely anywhere, everywhere. And then how do we take that and pair it with security, and taking a look at what are the current security practices? How is that protecting the information as their workforce becomes more mobile? And then what do they need to do to improve that when they're looking at different solutions? So perhaps there's things that they aren't able to accommodate in their current work environment, and how do they get that mobility and that security as they start looking at this increased mobility with their workplace. Also, a lot of people, when they look at deciding to migrate, is where are they currently? Do they have some disparate tools? Are they looking to standardize on a specific platform and really improve their holistic IT environment? And then look at their overall maintenance and security costs over time. You know, what are they supporting, and how can they consolidate some of this effort? How can they get rid of some of the physicality of devices and move much more cloud-based? And then overall, there are those other clients that are also looking at just doing a move from one tenant to another because they had a merger or an acquisition or even a divestiture, right? So there's all a variety of host of reasons that people look whether to migrate, and then looking at the comparison between the Microsoft stack and the competing product and what we can deliver.
So when people they decide, okay, it makes sense for me to really take a look at Office 365. It makes sense for me to make this move and migrate. Now, what am I migrating? So there's all sorts of workloads, different licensing plans. How do people go about deciding what Office environment, Office 365 environment best works for them?
Correct. So what we typically come in and do is with your account team or different partner resources, whoever is dealing with your licensing, is looking at what you currently have and leveraging what you own, and how do we either expand on that. So there are step ups or other tools that we can use in order to get you to a different level, or are we looking at kind of revamping your entire environment and the current way that you're scheduled or that you're licensed, and how do we kind of incorporate that into a holistic view. Overall, I would say also in your consideration is what are your users doing? What do you need them to be doing? and what licensing is best going to equip you to give them that edge, right? So I think a lot of us don't realize that there's a huge line of first line workers. So those are the people who are the first to engage with customers or be that face of the customer, the ones representing your brand. So we do have a set of licensing that also addresses those who might not need kind of that full stack of technology that you would get from E3s or E5s. We have ones called F1s, and you would typically use that in the more mobile. So they could be individuals who are sales associates, customer service, medical staff, factory workers. They're more task focused but still customer facing, right? So you want them to have a little lesser amount of the tools, but still be able to integrate within your environment. So schedule and task management, you still want to protect, and have the security around them, identity and access management, and capabilities and communication. So things like Skype or Teams and email functionality, right? But then we also have, which a lot of organizations are familiar with, are the E3s and the E5s. And those are the next levels of licensing. So those would be typically the E3s you would look at for those who are empowered to make some decisions and are more solution focused, and doing a little more of the analysis of information within your work environment. And you would need then to add on things that would more address some of their productivity and sharing of information, and maybe some more advanced threat protection. And then our most robust licensing is that looking at E5s. So these are definitely the people who are more data driven. They probably handle a little more sensitive of the information in the environment and are likely more collaborative, and therefore they need this more robust licensing to address the communications, more of the analytics, and then adherence to any compliance and discovery, right? So each of these tiers gives you your different type of user and what you could be looking for. But I highly suggest talking with either your partner or your account team to make sure that you find the licensing that's best for your workforce and your environment, because there are a lot of variations, and I am unfortunately not a licensing specialist. So at a high level, this kind of gives you the overview, but definitely have that candid dialogue and understand what your workforce is going to be doing.
Fantastic. Okay, so now I've looked at Office 365 and what it can do for me. I've compared it against my competitors, and I've decided I'm going to go with Office 365. I've taken a look at the different licensings and the applications that each one, or the abilities that each one provides me. So Kris, now that I've decided I'm going to Office 365 and I've picked my licensing and I'm ready to roll, what do I need to start thinking about to start this whole migration process?
Sure. So you need to consider the technology side of it, getting your connections hooked up, your Azure Active Directory sync, whatever components need to be ready to move you to the cloud. Now that technical side has become easier as the equipment and the infrastructure is a lot hosted in the cloud. So what we find is that's a fairly easy process, getting your technology ready. The challenge is the scheduling components, taking into account some, if you're doing a mail move, delegation and shared mailbox relationships, conference room ownership. It depends on what you're migrating from. So if you're going from on-prem Exchange to the cloud versus Notes to the cloud, they're two different projects with different considerations. Or if you're going from GroupWise or Gmail, believe it or not, there's still some GroupWise out there. And it could be you're doing an acquisition where you're going from one tenant to another tenant. And so there's a lot of components to consider. The things that we find people usually underestimate is the amount of communications needed to be sent to have your users be ready. Mobility can be a challenge, from whether you're keeping the same mobility management tool or whether you're going to a different one. There's generally a change to the mobile phone or the tablet. Often in sizing your engagement, we've found we've moved about 3 million mailboxes to the cloud for about 60 worldwide customers now. And one of the things we find consistently is when they're doing their mailbox counting, how many mailboxes do I have to move? They leave out shared mailboxes or conference rooms, and then they usually dramatically underestimate the entire mailbox size and count of items in the mailbox, which plays an impact as to how fast you can go. This is a project that the faster you go from a migration perspective, the better your end user experience is. But when you neglect to take into the delegation and shared mailbox relationships, you can hurt your users as well. Often customers don't take into account local PST files or archives or public folders. All of those need to have a plan for how you're going to attack them. And if you don't, they can be a big challenge on the back end. You know, the version of Office that is on the desktop, are you ready for the latest version of Office, or do you have the minimum version to work with? How are you going to handle work at home users? You've got your white glove users, your executives, and those who believe they should be. How are you going to handle them? What is the potential training? If you're going from a version of Office to a different version of Office, or Notes to Outlook, your steady state components need to be addressed. Maybe you're going to onboard people differently from a management perspective now that your mail and other components are up in the cloud. What other projects are intersecting with your users, so that there may be kind of a domino effect of different components need to slot in at different times. So knowing what else is, landing on your users' desktops is a key component to manage from that. And then planning for, anytime you do a velocity change in your environment, your call volume is probably going to go up on your support organizations and components like that. And so we have a service called Deployment Coordination Services that manages these components end to end with your organizations, whether it's another partner or your IT provider. But we've got a framework of components that you need to consider when, say, moving Office or email or OneDrive or SharePoint Online or Skype for Business or any of the other components.
Fantastic. So a lot of things to consider, a lot of challenges facing an organization, but the good news is there's services out there they can take advantage of, and there's ways to manage all of this, and the results will bear the fruit they're looking for. So Jennifer, we've chosen our Office 365. We know what we're going to migrate to. We're starting to put together a plan that will allow us to do the technical aspects of migrating everyone to Office 365, considering all those different variables. So what do we need now consider to make sure that after we've chosen the right thing and installed the right thing, that our end users and our organization can best take advantage of all that work?
Yeah, so when I work with my customers, I always talk about designing a plan that looks at the end in mind. So what does success look like? So we sit down and we talk about, what does success look like? What type of adoption rates are you looking for? And training is a huge component of that because that ensures the adoption. So we'll sit down, we'll talk about many different examples of projects that we've done successfully. We understand the audience that we are going to be training, and then we put this plan together, again, with the end in mind. But some of the things that are focus areas to think about is, first of all, understanding which technologies they're moving from and to, and what types of differences there are, so that we can put together an outline that is specific to their job role. So we always look at job roles and see what key functionality is needed to gain immediate productivity. And then we design the courses and the training classes by that job role so that they can apply the knowledge immediately when they are in the new environment. Another key piece is the timing of the deployment. Sometimes customers will have the deployment and the new technology is on their employee's desk, but they haven't provided training yet. Or other times they would have the training done, but it's a month later when the actual technology is at their fingertips. And so that timing is critical because you don't want to lose what you've learned. If you don't apply it, you will lose it. So that timing of the deployment with the timing and scheduling of the training is a critical piece to think about.
Okay, great. So, go ahead. Somebody want to jump in? No, I'm sorry. So, I'm a company. I'm looking at this. I'm going through this whole process. I guess my real consideration is, everything costs money, and as I'm going through this, I have to spend money on everything. Now, I'm definitely focused on getting my return, but I'm also trying to manage my costs. So when I look at this, how important is training to adoption? I mean, can we just roll it out, hope my employees just pick it up? Or I have, each one of my departments, I have champions. I have people that are early adopters that embrace technology. They enjoy that part of it. Can't they just do the knowledge transfer for me? Won't that be just as effective?
Yeah, so, training is a critical piece, like I mentioned, to adoption. So it is very important that training is given on the changes, on the new features of the technology, but also why this technology is important to the end user. So when training takes place, more and more users are really hesitant about the change. So the change is a huge piece to think about as part of the adoption process. So if you provide training, then that change resistance becomes a little bit easier. Your employees would have peace of mind so that they feel like, okay, I know now what to expect. I know what it looks like. I know how my environment is going to look like. So it kind of eases the burden of the change. So training really, really makes a big difference in adoption because we are managing the change through the process. We see organizations that don't provide training to their employees lose a lot of productivity, a tremendous amount of productivity, because what happens is that if I'm looking to do a certain task and I don't know where to find it or how to do it, I'm going to go to my next door person, ask them, ask 3 other people. Everybody's trying to figure out the solution to the problem, and now you've lost productivity for multiple people. So that's another reason why the cost for training definitely offsets the loss of productivity or the cost of the loss of productivity. So managing that change is very critical. So we need to make sure that we are talking to the different audiences and answering questions for them. You know, why is this change happening? How will I be impacted? What is this change going to do for me? Am I going to find what I use every day easily? So those types of things are, you know, really critical to bring out as part of the change management plan and through the training. You mentioned something about champions and early adopters. You know, they can do the knowledge transfer. Absolutely, they can do the knowledge transfer and the training internally. But it's really not a best use of your talent because this is not what they do best. This is not their day job or their everyday job. Our instructors really spend a lot of time connecting with the students. They're certified in the technologies that they teach. They also are certified in adult education so that they can really connect and ensure that productivity and retention is at its peak. So those are the main reasons why it's better and cost less to outsource your training rather than use internal talent, because at the end of the day, you want everybody adopting the technology quickly and being as productive as they were before in their old environment.
And I'm also guessing those champions have a job to do as well that isn't training. So in terms of productivity, and that's always a challenge, right, for customers to see. It's really easy to measure the idea of someone's going to be out of work for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever that amount be, to get training, and then they have to connect that to the return and the value that they'll get with that productivity, and it will far surpass those 3 hours, that cost. So Meghan, I manage a sales team. We're all over the country. We share documents. We work on documents at the same time. We communicate using Skype for Business. We do a lot of things, and Office 365 has sort of brought us together. And there's a lot of features that I'm sure we're not taking advantage of that I look forward to learning about. But we're all trying to get more out of less today as we move forward. That's our goal here, be more and more effective, more productive. So what are some of the features of Office 365 that allow us to do that?
So I took this at a high level, so because I know we could dive deep into any specific product. So I think a lot of it is, I think getting more out of less, and how I kind of took this question is, it's a comprehensive suite. So a lot of the tools and the things that you use on a day-to-day basis are integrated within each other, right? So you can easily go within OneNote and started to do in a task and in your task, and it imports it into your Outlook calendar, and you can work from there, and it can integrate across. You can then attach a document, assign it to somebody, and pull your information from OneDrive and really have a full holistic experience without even realizing that you're tapping into the other tools as you're performing your necessary functions. So you also have the co-authoring, which you can do when you're at the products online, or if you have it open, you can see who else is in there and really have a full collaboration experience. There's the different things within Teams, which is one of our newer products, and we can talk a little bit more about that later as well, because I'm sure a lot of people have questions on Teams. Where you can share content, and you have a whole single panel where you are developing that one place for your experience. So your instant messaging, your conference calling, your meeting scheduling, and your document management are all falling within one realm. So really trying to gain efficiencies in the different tools and features that are surrounding your day-to-day work, and how do you interact with all of the things. I think most of us refer to the waffle or the little matrix up in the upper left, and how do you leverage all those different tools and the features that are in there. So there's also analytics and things you can use there. So you can go into Power BI and have a robust source of leveraging different reporting from the sources that you have, and tying that back into developing a dashboard, which can provide you with capabilities that you can send in email or on a front page in SharePoint and share that information out. You also have features such as Windows 10 and that where we're really updating it on a more recurrent basis, right? So it becomes more invisible. So I think some of the struggle that people have had before is and staying on top of patches and security updates, and making sure that those are done on a recurring basis on servers and devices, as well as Office and Skype applications and such. And now looking at the ability to really have that transparency behind it, where you're not going to have a variance between your user bases when they're all on Teams, because the client is constantly being updated, and the frequency with which and ease with which you can manage the Windows updates happening in the background in the spring and the fall really will help alleviate some of those pain points of people being in different environments at the same time. And then, there's the O365 admin continually that you can leverage for analyzing how the different tools within the Microsoft stack is being utilized. Where are some of the gaps? Are people adopting? And, with things like workplace analytics, really helping, Microsoft is working to help with the organization to take a look at how the tools are being used and if they are being used. And we're moving a little more towards adoption focused and getting some more value from what you've bought, as opposed to just getting you the new purchase, right, or adding on to your stack. We really want to make sure you're using what you own and leveraging all the different tools and features and functionality. Well,
see, I learned something new. I didn't know there was a component of Office 365 that had a nickname based off my favorite breakfast food. So I'm going to remember waffle from now on. So you mentioned Teams. So I know this could be really, we could go really deep on this, but maybe just a high level. It is interesting now. So we have Teams and SharePoint and some other tools. How does a customer best sort of decide where to use which one of those things in the right way?
Yep, and we have some various slides and literature, which I kind of give the visual, which I think helps in a lot of ways instead of just dialoguing, but I'll try to do my best. So it's really, your inner circle and the people you are working and collaborating with on a daily basis. So if you have a specific project or initiative and you have people kind of rallying around this, right, we kind of form these teams, which may or may not sustain for a certain period of time, right? And you set up teams in your channels and those discussions. All the documentation can be there. You can have the owners and the user or the members come in, and you can add people to either a specific channel or for the team holistically and kind of take a look at things. And they really, in this way, it's the transitioning and the benefit is there for not having to recap everybody, you know, kind of when somebody new comes on board, you can have that kind of brain dump that you have with somebody. This allows the person to kind of go through earlier conversations. They can see the documentations that's out there and they can really form to that team much more rapidly. It's also evolving, you know, Teams is constantly evolving. So Skype initiatives are still going on out there, and all of the functionality that's with Skype, the feature parity is coming to be there with Teams. So don't feel like any Skype initiatives would negate work that you're doing. You know, like should you halt anything and go towards just moving towards Teams. We're really working to partner these together and how do you leverage the capabilities of each within your environment until the point where you might want to make a switch depending on how your work processes are going and getting to a more holistic Teams environment or aligning more down your Skype path. And then within the analytics and the things that you can use behind it, obviously there's a SharePoint backend. The OneDrive is aligned there, and you can use all of the tools within the waffle. So you can use Word and Excel, PowerPoint, all those right from within Teams. So it's really a holistic view of your daily work processes. That being said, there is SharePoint, which is existing out there, and that's definitely documentation and content. There's a lot of historical information and different ways that you can leverage SharePoint. It's also, you know, gaining kind of recently more revival. You know, you can do intranet and really point to a lot of things and utilize SharePoint in that way. And then Skype, the functionality within Skype is really tailored towards the conferencing and the communication, right? So your voice and those capabilities and instant messaging. So we've set things up so that you can activate or deactivate certain components between Skype and Teams at this time. So you can kind of look at some of those things if you're evaluating looking at Teams. But you know, they currently there's a shift and there's a purpose for Teams, but I definitely see the future kind of making some evolution towards that being a more holistic picture.
Fantastic. I mean, I didn't mean to do this on purpose, but I'm so glad this is being recorded because I think you just won an argument for me, an internal company argument for me. So I appreciate it. Thank you. You didn't even know you're doing that for me. Just to, and Marty, I think she did. So just to stick on sort of thinking about 365 and some of the things we can do that are interesting and new. Can you talk a little bit about the BYOD or the mobile aspects of 365 that customers can take advantage of?
Sure, definitely. So I think I kind of referenced this before. A lot more individuals are looking at their ability to be remote or work from home, and whether that's on their mobile device or on a laptop, right? It's just mobility is ever present. And what organizations need to look for is, and now that we have this, we have individuals who are saying, yeah, I just want to use my own cell phone, or, you know, versus, you know, a corporate device. You know, I sometimes when I'm in the airport, can't pull out my laptop. I need to get to data. I need to be on calls. I need to do these things. So what we have with O365 is it's platform agnostic, right? So we can perform now on Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, a lot of the devices that are out there today, and the users can capitalize on the experience in getting in there. With that, obviously, comes security and making sure that your mobile device platform has been secured so that you don't have, or that you can mitigate your risk as it relates to intellectual property or any corporate information that might be on a device. Particularly as we know, people set down a phone or a laptop in the oddest places, and it gets left behind, right? So how do you manage that risk, and how do you work with a mobile workforce and really empower that workforce to do what they're doing? So we do have different protection that Microsoft offers just to help in the security. So we do have app protection for mobile apps. So those are ones that are just on your mobile devices. And we can protect things like your email, calendar, contacts, documents through the enforcement of policies. So you can set parameters around different things like deleting business data after a certain period of time if it doesn't connect to a certain service, or requiring that information is stored, right? So if people are storing information from their laptop or their mobile device, that it is only stored in OneDrive for Business, and therefore keeping that documentation corporately owned. Also, I think a lot of people know they see the PIN or fingerprint verification, and therefore enabling the more security on that mobile device or that cell phone in order to even access Office apps. So that can also aid in the prevention of company data being copied from one app into a personal place. And then, I think we talked about it as the device management for Windows 10. So how do you want to enforce your capabilities and help make sure that your mobile workforce is protected against things like malware, or how to enforce a screen locking and making sure that people aren't looking over their shoulders, and then how to do a remote wipe, right, for these devices if something does get lost or stolen. So we have a strong commitment to our users, so our clients and the end user population on how to access information and how to leverage O365 on any device that they're on, and obviously we encourage that. We want that to happen. And then we also want to help the organizations who are allowing their workforce to be in that way to definitely be protected against what they're doing. So I hope that covers it.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. So the idea of I know I used to work in support within a company, and the idea that people can utilize and access Office 365, all the information, the data from anywhere they are using any device is, on one hand, you can see the empowerment that takes place. On the other hand, I think if we had our way, everybody would have had the same exact device, no matter who you were, doing the same job because of the support issues. So, Kris, when you're talking to customers and planning for all this, and they're getting you to roll out, how do you help them prepare and address either the BYOD or the mobile aspects of using Office 365?
Well, obviously there's compliance issues that the customers have. We see a lot of our really highly secure organizations often mandate, here's a device, you can go get your own, or here's a company given device. The ability to split the device kind of in half and manage personal separated from business is beautiful there. We are also seeing a ton of customers saying, as long as it's on our mobility environment and it's managed, any device you want to bring is fully supportable. And so we're seeing both of those trends, leaning toward BYOD pretty heavily. There's obviously the concerns of security, and that Meghan, I think, just hit on pretty hard. So the challenge is then what we're seeing a lot is customers moving from one MDM solution to another MDM solution like Intune or any of the EMS components. And so there's a change that has to happen to the end user's device. And that tends to be the most challenging part for the end users to make that change. As scripted as you can make it, or as push as you can make it, often the end user has to do something, and that tends to be a challenge.
Yeah, end users, I mean, if I think about my phone, I'm a person who uses this phone to answer calls, get my emails, but beyond setting that up correctly into the environment, that I can easily get lost. Or that's just, that maybe my Surface or my whatever tablet I'm using. So I can see from that perspective, Jennifer, I'm working for a company, and we're going through all this change, and I've got devices I want to use. I have, we talked about, productivity I have to maintain. What are some of the concerns that end users have, and how does a good adoption program, change management program, address those concerns?
So it is very, very important to address end users' concerns as part of the migration. It's something that you should plan for, you should think about, and change management, again, has a big part of that, to really understand what are the concerns, what are the challenges that the end users are going to feel through this migration. So, so creating a communications plan, a T- schedule where as soon as you finalize the migration and you know what that schedule looks like, communications should go out, really talking about the change, getting the buy-in, and then holding sneak peek sessions where they can come in and see the technology and understand how it's going to affect them, why this change is being made, and what's in it for them. So, you know, as you plan the migration, you need to continuously be getting buy-in from the end users, as well as answering their questions. Most times we find end users are just need to be reassured that their data, their customizations, any macros, any specific things they're working on will be moved over without any loss of data. And so that transition, to make it very clear to them that you know, that environment is secure, we are planning on transitioning that data, migrating that data. When they get to the new environment, they will see it, we'll teach them how to use it. It might be a little bit different or look different, but you know, we will provide them training to actually get through and understand the changes. So really just making them feel part of the change, as well as identifying the areas that they're concerned about and reassuring them is very important. Other ways we do that, we, you know, on that communication schedule, we can have posters, we can do kiosk sessions, we can do some one-on-one desk side coaching where we're really showing them how their new environment is going to look. So lots of ways to really put an end to their concerns.
So a lot of things going on during this change. I know that when I attend training, I do my best to absorb as much as I can. Usually there's some components or some handouts or some information provided to me. How do we ensure that, like, that the training just doesn't stop in the classroom? Because usually that time, you know, you get something out of it, but you want to make sure that you have retention. So how do we usually address that, and how's that effective?
So I'm a big believer that learning does not stop at the end of class. You know, you don't retain everything from the class anyway. I have a passion for learning, and with so much information out there, we're all learning continuously. You know, we have phones and computers at our fingertips to learn anytime, anywhere right now. But what we want to do as part of this migration is to think about continuous learning. So what tools do we leave with them after the class to ensure that they have reference materials? So one thing we do is quick reference cards. So they are either virtual or laminated right by their desktop, where they can refer to a quick tip or trick that they needed to use for a project. So those are very, very helpful for continuous learning, because like I said, you don't remember or retain everything you learned in class. Another piece that we do is on-demand videos, where let's say you have a project coming up, and part of that project is to create a pivot table, but you don't remember that from class, or maybe they didn't even cover it in class. You can go to this 2-minute video clip, and it will take you through all of the steps to create the pivot table. And now you can be instantly productive, work on your project, use that video as your continuous learning tool, as your guide, and now right on the spot, you had your answers to complete the project. So continuous learning is very, very important for a successful adoption.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. You know, Kris, we talked a little early in the conversation. I think we talked about the cloud aspect of Office 365, and the decision whether or not, how do customers go about evaluating and make the right decisions on whether they should, is it going to be on-prem, is it going to be cloud, hybrid? How do they manage that part of it, and how do they make those decisions?
Sure. So what we see is most customers do go with some form of hybrid. My preference is with a focus as much in the cloud as possible and as much on-prem as necessary. Maybe if we're talking email, it depends on what you're moving from and to. So if you're notes to the cloud, often there are notes applications that need to stay on-prem until a shared mailbox or a SharePoint workflow solution is created. So we see those hybrid situations there quite often. Was working with Barracuda at a cloud summit, and one of the comments that they made was, every day you don't move to the cloud, or every year you don't move to the cloud, you kind of run about 3 years behind in technology. And so the hybrid approach, most people do that as an enabler to get there, and then as soon as they can, remove that hybrid scenario. Some of the cloud components really don't have a hybrid scenario. Office is, Office Pro Plus, click to run. That's all cloud-based and installs locally. So it really depends on what you're moving from and to, from the how hybrid you are. Some SharePoint sites with a lot of automation function better on-prem versus the SharePoint Online for storage and fairly simple workflow sites. So it really depends on the situation.
And you mentioned earlier about migrating data. Certainly something, from an end user's perspective, Jennifer was talking about comfort level with the changes. We all want to wake up after all this takes place and everything is where we expect it to be. How do they make sure that we migrate that data correctly to make the end user experience as best as possible, but also put things where they need to be?
Sure. So, security is a good reason to move the data to the cloud. I think Microsoft's got the ability to secure the environment far better than most organizations spend on their entire IT budget from that perspective. The data migration depends on what you're going from and to. If you're going from My Sites to OneDrive, that can be a totally different migration process than, say, just going from Exchange on-prem to the Office 365 email portion of the cloud. Microsoft's offerings of the Fast Track Center are one of my favorite organizations to partner with in terms of kind of a factory mode. If you have a lot of end users that need to migrate, the Fast Track Center is able to manage your velocity migrations in a phenomenal way. If it's a smaller organization, working with a partner to bring in some of their tools, the binary tree tools or the Quest tools or any of the other tools that do migrations. We use a lot of ShareGate tools, which is a light and inexpensive tool, but needs some automation wrapped around it. And we've got custom scenarios where we've done very unique migrations where there isn't an out-of-the-box tool that would handle that from that perspective. We've seen different scenarios where mailboxes are migrated empty and then the users move their data as they need to, or they go back to their old mailbox. It's not our favorite scenario, but it does happen occasionally. We've seen scenarios where you light up OneDrive, but don't do any real data migration and let the user decide what they want to move from, say, a home directory or their local C drive to OneDrive. And so we've seen many different approaches to that scenario. Our goal is get as much data in the cloud as possible. It just secures it, makes it backed up, disaster recovery, all of those components are wonderfully well addressed once your data is in the cloud.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kris. Jennifer, we're getting ready to wrap up, but you had mentioned something, and I wanted to go back to it real quick. You'd mentioned on-demand solutions. People have access. There's lynda.com and there's YouTube, and there's other people that provide on-demand training. And they're usually, when you look at them on their own, they seem to be they seem to be an inexpensive solution. How does on-demand play a role in adoption? And is it something that they should consider as a sole, way of training their end users?
So, great question. And, we are seeing in the learning environment a trend more on blended learning. Many people learn differently, all people learn differently, and so we want to have tools and material and reference for them to continuously learn all throughout their process. So on-demand solutions are a great companion to instructor-led training. We are still very, very comfortable with an instructor-led training model, just because that's what we had in school, that's what we had, all throughout our education period. And so we find that the on-demand solution is a great companion with the instructor-led training. So the instructor-led training tailored to your job role, just in time, just enough training, whether you need a 30, 60, 90-minute session. We're not doing full days on one application anymore because organizations are looking for cost-effective and time-respective solutions. So, but I definitely recommend an on-demand piece to the instructor-led training so that, like the pivot table example I gave earlier, there are things that you might need to reference on the fly for a specific project, and you have that right at your fingertips. So the on-demand piece, I think, is critical for the long-term learning. And I would really look at the source to make sure that your on-demand training is standardized, everybody is using the same source, and it meets the same type of customization as you had before.
Great. Well, I guess along with, you were talking about continuous training. We have a question in the chat box. Michael wanted to know about QRCs, how we provide them, where we get them from, how we develop them, if that's what we do.
Sure. So what we do is our approach to migrations is pretty customized in the sense that we've got some really turnkey solutions. We've got turnkey quick reference guides. We have turnkey videos that you can just purchase. But a lot of customers say, well, this is by job role. These are the functionalities that we're really looking for. And so we can go a step further and customize the quick reference cards. We can customize videos to provide just enough information for that job role and make it very direct so that when they are using that, they're not fumbling through a bunch of different pieces to get to what they want. So we understand their job role, and then we can customize based on job role, but we also have some standardized ones that customers can purchase.
Fantastic. We've got a couple minutes left. If anybody has any questions that they want to put in for those, if we don't get to the questions, we will follow up and we'll reach out to you and answer those questions. Make sure you do get an answer.
Ken, I know that
the questions. Kris or Meghan will track them down.
I know we're running out of time here, but I think there's a good question from Michael in the chat box that Jennifer may want to address. Where do you see CIE's customer immersion experiences fitting into the training offering that we should provide our end users?
I think that's a great question, and they have been very, very successful in really showing our customers what a day in the life of that technology would look like. As Meghan talked about the different workloads and the different applications, one of the trends that we are really seeing is collaboration between the workloads. And so, so I think, showing how that collaboration really takes place in a customer immersion experience, I think is very, very powerful for the customer to see how they can use the technology. I hope that answered the question.
Okay, great. Well, we're coming to the end of our time. Like I said, if you do have any questions, you can type in the chat box. We can leave it open for a little bit. Also, we'll reach out to everyone and see if there is anything that they want to discuss after this and answer any questions that are outstanding. I want to thank everybody for attending. I want to thank Meghan, Kris, Jennifer for your time and your expertise. And if anybody has any, if they'd like to learn more, please feel free to reach out to us. If again, like I mentioned before, if your questions are more related to Meghan or Kris, we'll make sure we get them involved. But I thank everyone for attending and hope everybody has a fantastic day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, everyone.